Man is an animal in search of a master, and yet, unlike an animal, man can choose his own master. It's a particular burden, but also an opportunity of subjectivity, which is that you can choose a master. You can find a figure to identify with. And I want to make a distinction here between pseudo-masters and real, authentic masters. A pseudo-master tells you how to live. A pseudo-master tries to sell you courses, telling you how to improve your life. Whereas a true master simply lives their own best life. A true master, in their very freedom, makes you want to be free as well. Like, think about walking into a gallery and you see a work of art that's so incredible that you think, I would like to make this too. Think about reading a book that was written with such bravery that you think, wow, I would like to have a voice like this as well. The true master never teaches directly, but teaches indirectly. In their very freedom, they want to make other people free as well. And Slavoj Žižek therefore argues in the final chapter of Against Progress, in an essay titled On Authority, that we can therefore distinguish between three types of masters. We have the pseudo-master, who teaches you how to live, who instructs you. We have the true master, who doesn't care what other people think, who is not bothered by other people's lives, who simply does what they think is right, who essentially has a solipsistic existence and therein becomes a master. And finally, we have what he calls the fascist or Stalinist master, the one who claims to know better than the other what is good for them and how they ought to live. The master who says that he is the embodiment of the other's will, indeed of the popular will. The master as a kind of manifest destiny. And Slavoj Žižek argues, therefore, that one of the opportunities of being a subject, indeed perhaps one of the necessities, is that we choose a master. That we choose a master who allows us to be. In fact, Borges, in his writings on nonfiction, has a great observation where he says that over the course of his career and his life, he has had many different masters who have essentially granted him license to think and write, which is to say, he quips, these masters have served him. And when they have served him enough, he has conveniently discarded them only to replace them with other masters. And I think this is a very important insight, which is to say that a master is someone who tacitly gives you license to be, to create. Like, you read something and it makes you feel like you want to write as well. You see a really good person and it makes you want to be a better person as well. They're not a role model in that you try to be like them, but they create what you might call a sphere of possibility in which you can posit yourself. Hence why Alain Badiou, the French philosopher who Žižek also cites here, says that a master allows the subject to become himself. And this stands against the Nietzschean idea, the binary, if you will, of slave morality. Nietzsche basically argued that you could either be a master or a slave, but best of all was to be a master of yourself. That the slave was somebody who both resented the master and yet secretly worshipped the ground on which they tread. Of course, we can often see how this is true, right? We idolize people. We enjoy watching them from a distance, but this induces in us a kind of paralysis in which we do nothing with our own lives. We simply watch other people do it. We have a kind of vicarious enjoyment of their lives. In fact, you could say that certain cinema franchises work like this as well. They give you a kind of license to vicariously enjoy. Think about James Bond, for example. One of the interesting things about James Bond, which I enjoy the franchise very much, is that James Bond is the ultimate masculine fantasy in that he has a license to kill, which is, strictly speaking, a license to enjoy. He is allowed to go around the world like Marx observed a happy alienated subject who can drift and roam freely from one luxury resort to another. He is essentially state-funded, and he has a maternal figure of authority he can return to, who rolls her eyes and gently chides him and then sends him out again. Here we have the ultimate subject who is free to be his own master, and yet who tacitly nevertheless enjoys being subject to a benevolent master, as it were. And Žižek says that here we can see the limitations of the Nietzschean idea of slave morality, which is to say that Nietzsche's argument that you can free yourself from the master by becoming your own master misses the element in which we secretly enjoy being subject. We enjoy being subject to someone, to a master. In fact, you could argue that in love, we become subject to one another. We become both slaves and masters to each other, which is a form of redemption, if you will. Žižek therefore makes the argument, and Alain Badiou does so similarly, that to be truly free isn't to free yourself from the master, but to find a master that is worth being subject to. An empty figure of authority, not a pseudo-master who tells you how to live, but instead someone who lives with such abundance and freedom that it makes you want to be free as well. I've mentioned this frequently, but to me, Luffy in the manga and anime One Piece is one such authentic master. Luffy sets other people free, not by severing their chains, but by making them want to be free as well. And what's important is that he is, strictly speaking, the figure of the fool, which is to say, he doesn't look very strong, he's very silly and naive, and yet this is precisely his strength. Lacan had a similar theory, which we can apply to One Piece. Lacan said that there's a distinction between the fool and the knave, and the fool is always the figure of truth. It's the supposed idiot, the naive one, the one who is so confident in themselves that they don't have to try to change their behavior for other people. They simply interact authentically, as it were. But the knave is the professional who pretends to be naive, who pretends to look at the world in realistic terms and wants to hear out both sides, etc. The knave, therefore, is the professional idiot, the one who keeps himself dumb because it is convenient to him in the social sphere. But the genuine figure of truth is the fool who simply engages radically, naively with his reality and his surroundings. And in this very absolute freedom makes other people want to be free as well, makes them realize that it is indeed possible. Hence, Žižek argues in his essay on authority that, strictly speaking, true authority must always be empty. He's building here upon Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard, in his philosophical fragments, essentially writes that the authority of Christ doesn't stem from Christ's wisdom as such, that Christ is the best representative of God, the one we should aspire to be like, the best dressed and etc., most well-spoken. Instead, strictly speaking, as Žižek once characterized it, Christ is a monstrous obscenity, which is to say, if we consider him as a sage, as a figure of authority, he fails. He is essentially crucified. In other words, he fails to be a pseudo-master, and in so doing becomes a true or authentic master. He is willing to go all the way in his supposedly naive stance. Therefore, the authority of Christ derives not from a position of authority from which he speaks, but precisely from the impossible position from which he speaks. An authority that is derived not from some worldly status, but precisely from his willingness to go all the way. Therefore, Žižek says that the paradox of authority is that it always comes from this empty place. We derive authority from someone not because they have proven themselves to be figures we ought to trust, but because they are figures who embody authority in their very freedom, in their very disregard of conventional notions of status and authority. Now, I'd like to conclude here by saying that it makes sense that we need masters. We need role models, especially in these uncertain times in which it seems like increasingly everybody is just being their worst selves and failing their way to the top. I believe that ultimately we can make other people more emancipated, not by telling them what to do, but by showing them how it is done. And that when we write and think and speak and act with love and kindness and abundance, then we encourage other people to do so as well. Therefore, freedom is simply the positive quality by which we see other people and we would like to be more like them. Not more rich, more wealthy, more famous, more powerful, but more free. Therefore, in a sense, we do return to the Nietzschean idea of morality, Nietzsche's basic argument that one has to become the master of oneself. But the paradox is that, therefore, to become a master, one must first choose a master. And this is a responsibility, not just an obligation. You must choose your masters wisely, for the quality, if you will, of your masters will have a great determining factor on the quality of your life. And so choose your master carefully. That is your obligation as a subject. Man is an animal in search of a master, but unlike an animal, he can choose his own master. Who is yours? Thanks for watching. If you'd like to go deeper into these topics, please consider becoming a patron, where you can download my full lecture archives, including my ebooks and a weekly Q&A session. See you there.